Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We're very glad to see you all. Welcome to the History Center. My name is George. I'm the head of programs here at the History Center, and I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's presentation in partnership with the wonderful folks at Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. Just wanted to say a few things. Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a special thank you to Jennifer McGregor for making this program partnership possible, and to Susan Banks and everyone else at Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. They're a pleasure to work with, and we're always happy to use the space as we come together to celebrate local history. With that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Executive Director at Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, Jennifer McGregor.
I'm really happy to be here as the Foundation's new Executive Director, and I wanted to say it's so wonderful to have Marcy Kerr here. She was our former Executive Director for 17 years, so it's really wonderful to have you here. I know we have a number of our board members. If you're comfortable, raise your hand. We have wonderful working, intelligent board, and they're all percolated here, so thank you for being here. We encourage all of you, and I know there are a lot of members here, but if you're interested in joining the foundation, we have information out in the lobby. Come find any of us. We have a lot of really great programming, and actually we have an intense week. We have tonight's program, obviously. And then next week on the 12th, we're hosting another book event with Charles Stick at the Gorton Center, which I know, I'm looking around the room, I know some of you were double dipping and we'll see you next week, but I believe we have about 15 more spots. It's really going to be highly attended, so we're looking forward to that. So moving on to tonight, I really am happy that you mentioned too, this partnership that we have with History Center and with the library, and really exemplifying this cultural corridor that we have in Lake Forest. And we really are so much stronger together and with these partnerships. So we thank you for your hospitality. This is really just a magnificent space for us to be in. So we are excited to partner on this program together with the History Center, and welcome you to the Stuart Cohen and Julie Hacker insightful program on theories and strategies for making additions to historic buildings that preserve their embodied energy and their cultural significance. Stuart Cohen and Julie Hacker, both fellows of the AIA, I see others in the audience, are a husband and wife team with nearly 40 years of architectural practice together. Stuart and Julie's contributions to the practice, to architectural history, theory, and education have been recognized with an award for excellence from the Society of Architectural Historians in 2019. Stuart's a professor of architecture emeritus at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and his writing on history and theory received an Arthur Ross Award from the Institute for Classical Architecture and Art, the ICAA, in 2018. He's the author of 4 books on the history of Chicago's residential architecture, and in 2019, he and Julie edited an issue of The Classicist on Chicago architecture for the ICAA. In 2021, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Chicago chapter of the AIA. Julie currently serves on the board of directors of the Chicago chapter of the AIA and on the National Steering Committee for the AIA CRAN, which is the Custom Residential Architects Network, spearheading programming for the 2022 National Symposium in Chicago. Julie served for 6 years in the Evanston Preservation Commission. It was instrumental in the rewriting of their preservation and solar guidelines. We're so honored to have this dynamic duo with us tonight to showcase their new book, First Editions, Strategies for Adding On, to visualize their concepts and representing both a theoretical and philosophical position about altering older buildings, something I know this room cares a great deal about. So without further ado, and I'm sorry for advancing all these slides, please join us in welcoming Stuart Cohen and Julie Hacker.
Jennifer, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I just want to say a little things. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Friends, I see, colleagues, and everyone else. Jennifer already gave this great introduction, but it is true that Stuart and I have been together and practicing for 40 years, so when we speak up here, it may be a little comical. We're hoping to add that tonight. I think everyone needs it. Anyway, one of the things I just want to say is this book was really a labor of love. You know, we've done additions and remodelings really for 40 years, along with new construction, but to really bring it forward to this book and talk about really the theoretical basis for a lot of the additions, and it really actually coordinates well with the first book that we did, which is Transforming the Traditional, which talks about how we reinforce really contemporary spaces with traditional detailing. And in much of this work, you'll see those same ideas. However, the context is different because it's an existing building. Anyway, anything you want to say, or you can take it away? I need that cane, but I will.
Okay. This is going to be past the conch shell.
Here, hold it higher.
Oh, I hate these things. Can people hear me? No. Okay. Thank you for that quick answer. So Julie was going to begin by reading our philosophy, which is that we believe that recycling existing houses, retrofitting them to bring them up to current energy standards, preserving what's referred to as their embedded energy, which is really just the materials and the labor and craftsmanship that it takes to make something, and then also preserving their historical significance within a community is really, in this age when everybody's talking about sustainability, is the most sustainable way, in our opinion, to practice architecture. So hit the right one. Oh, good, you did it. So it may be obvious to say, but houses and buildings are enlarged for a series of really simple reasons. They're enlarged to create more space, to change the use of that existing space, and sometimes just to modernize or to change their function. Next. Okay. This was pretty common in Europe when houses were multi-generational, and you can see what the kids did when they got mom and dad's house. Next slide. Okay. So there are just a few simple addition strategies, that is, ways to extend or enlarge buildings. And we refer to the most common type as a lateral extension. That is, you can take the existing building or the existing house and you can build out the side, you can build out the front, you can build out the back. The other way to enlarge a structure or a house is to extend it vertically. That is, to put more floors on it. And then the really interesting strategy, which is not done very often, we refer to as a concentric extension, which is where the existing building has been turned into a core. It's been subsumed by building around it, either all of it or three sides of it. Next one. Okay, so I wanted to just look at some historical examples to begin with. And this is Schlesinger and Mayer, and the image on the left is Adler and Sullivan in 1893, and they built a 9-story building and then came back in 1903 and extended it, as you can see, around the corner with that famous striated corner. And then, interestingly, in 1906, D.H. Burnham and Company extended it 6 more bays down State Street. And you can see what's happened with the Adler and Sullivan addition to their original building, and then with the later Burnham and Company addition, is that they've simply replicated the bay spacing, the details, the cornice, and the ground floor. Can you do the next slide? So this is Schlesinger and Mayer, Carson Peary Scott, now the Art Institute building as it exists today. And interestingly, in 1961, Halliburton Root built this little piece on the end. It's 9 stories high, which was the height of the original Adler and Sullivan, Schlesinger and Mayer building. So perhaps their thinking was that they would simply bookend this big piece that had come around the corner and down State Street. But as you can see, again, the strategy is simply to make some more of Adler and Sullivan's or Louis Sullivan's kind of wonderful gridded building. Okay. I don't think most people think of this as a building addition, but it's Chicago's Monadnock building. And on the left-hand side, you're looking at the north end, which was designed by John Wellborn Root, Daniel Burnham's partner. And it's a really unique building because the Brooks family in Boston actually didn't believe in this newfangled invention called the steel frame, and they asked that the building be built as a bearing wall building. So it turns out that it's the tallest bearing wall building in the world. And interestingly, what Root did as a designer, because it was all brick with no real ornamental relief to it, is he flared the bottom out, the base, and then did the same thing at the top, which was to curve it just slightly to create a profile against the sky. Root died, and when the Brooks family wanted to build the north half of the building, because Daniel Burnham was actively involved in the World's Fair, they went to Halliburton and Roche and built the portion that you see on the right-hand slide, which is really interesting. It's a steel frame building, so the architects expressed the steel frame, but between the expressed columns, there are these undulating window bays, which really picks up on the visual quality of John Wellborn Root's building. But interestingly, where Root's building just had this kind of flared out base, you can see they've done a proper 2-story base with a cornice, with classical columns, and then look at the top of their building. They've actually done a cornice there. And, you know, it occurred to me at one point that what these guys were doing, Halliburton and Roche, was making an addition which was acting as a kind of academic correction of what at that point in time was truly an unusual and must have been somewhat weird building, which was all brick and devoid of ornamentation, devoid of a real base, devoid of a real top. And at one point I found this wonderful quote from T.S. Eliot, who you all know as a poet, but he wrote literary criticism as well. And he said, criticism must always profess an end in view, which roughly speaking appears to be the elucidation of works of art and the correction of taste. So what Halliburton and Root are doing is they're doing a building which is a correction of taste with respect to the Monadnock building. Okay. An amazing and wonderful building that grew by like Topsy was Charles Bulfinch's Massachusetts State House, which faces the green. And you can see on the left-hand side, the area that's called number 1 or labeled number 1 corresponds to the Bulfinch rendering of the State House. And then you can see what happened to it over a period of time. It gets a little bump out the back and then a bigger bump out the back, which is just visible here. And then suddenly they make this huge extension out the back, and then at the beginning of the 20th century, it gets kind of wings facing the commons, making a kind of entry space. I'm going to do the next slide. So there's all that stuff happening out the back, which is actually in terms of creating a series of new entryways and kind of respecting the architecture and the volume of the Bulfinch State House, pretty interestingly done. And then the later additions, which are the wings that come forward. The Boston Commons building, which had its dome and roof removed and got a tower built on top of it by Peabody and Stearns in 1913. So the classical building becomes a kind of classical base for this tower, and seems to handle it pretty well in terms of the idea of the thing. And then not very many buildings that have been completely built around, but probably the most famous one in terms of architectural history is Andrea Palladio's remaking of the Venice City Hall, the Basilica. And in the lower left image, you can see in red the original Gothic building, which actually was not even regular. It was kind of skewed because of the site. And then Palladio wraps it and remakes it into a completely new structure with the what's now known as Palladian window, but a Palladian arcade, which is an arch and then flanking columns. And interestingly enough, in his 4 books of architecture, he publishes the project and he draws it as if it was a brand new kind of idealized building. But it's an example of completely wrapping a building, burying it, and coming up with something that's wholly new. Okay. Before we look at more recent projects, I just wanted to say that I've had this kind of fascination with doing building additions, house additions, and part of it is because the very first when I first started my practice, the very first commissions I got were things like this. Totally undistinguished houses that I was asked to add things onto. In fact, these were buildings that in architecture school, architects were taught to actually look down on as kind of non-whatever. And in doing something like this, the game was to look at the elements of the existing house, you know, the gable, the rake-ends, the corner windows, the way things were assembled, and then to put those, to assemble those into an addition and try to make something that was transformative or entirely new. We never said things like that to our clients, but the idea, we used to, in the office, when we'd get things like this, joke that, you know, while you couldn't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, you know, we could do a perfectly good pair of gloves or belts or shoes. Okay. The other strategy was sort of to look at a sort of bad builder house and say, well, what was the original model for this? What might the architect, if there was one, have actually had in mind? And we did an addition to the entire back of this ranch house and pretended that somehow or other the architect had been thinking about Frank Lloyd Wright in the 1950s, and Frank Lloyd Wright's Usonian houses. So that's the addition that we did to the back. Okay.
Okay. Switch. So, all right, fast forward. I think this was, we did this in the 90s. This was, so this house, this is an addition to the back of a house, and it's the first addition we did. This happens a lot, I'm sure, to many architects. You do an addition, then you come back and you do another addition. Well, this was the first addition. So we're matching all the details in all of the work that we do. There was an addition to the kitchen with this dormer, and there was a new principal suite over a family room. So lateral extension. The owner, so we had done the kitchen, and then the owners bought a piece of property next door, and they wanted to turn it into a garden, and so they said, well, come back and then redo the kitchen, and that also happens a lot. So they wanted to open it up to the yard, and we did this, and we just floated the hood and basically did the work to create that. The next image is looking to the backyard, and we did this big, large glass cabinet, which is a giant window to the rear yard. And then this was just an image looking into the family room. And we just created this intermediate space, which is where the breakfast table is. So it's a continuous space. This project was to a house designed by Robert Work. Yes, right. So you can see this was the back of the rear of the house. So the bottom is the existing, and there was this kind of this truncated porch piece there, which had just a flat roof. And then there was the I'm just going to walk around because I'm so short, right? You can see. Then there was the servants' quarters here. And so this piece came off to make a new kitchen, family room, and principal suite above. And we added on this piece another roof. So there was a pairing. There was a porch. You can see that's the new facade over open porch outside of the bedroom. And then this is the image. Okay, so you can see this is the existing house, and then this is the new addition here, and there's a new roof on that. So, and then the interiors were, we do this a lot too, opening kitchens to family rooms and matching the detailing of the house always. So this is that image of the new kitchen family room. And then the principal suite has this vaulted space, which ends in a new fireplace with overmantel mirror. And there's windows on either side, which are basically these windows. So that's the new facade. There's those windows with dormers, so they kind of ride up around the arch, the vaulted ceiling, which is the bed sits under. And then the bathroom, which has another vaulted space ending in a window. So this was an interesting house. This is the existing house above with this detached garage, and you can see the principal structure. It's by Ernst Grunsfeld II. He did the planetarium, right? Okay. So what we were asked to do is make a new principal suite, new kitchen, new family room, and you can see up above the addition was sort of truncated off the masonry gable, and we took that off. We had to build forward because of the ravine site and code issues, and just created another sort of an entry. And that was the existing entry, and so there's a court. This is the principal suite corridor, and then new kitchen and garage. And so in plan, so I'm sure everyone here can read plans, right? So you can see, all right, so existing, and then this is new butler's pantry, breakfast room, kitchen, and then family room, and then garage. And that's the rear of the house, which we never really could get a great picture because it's on the ravine, but those windows are to the stair hall, which are right there at the stair. And this is the interior of the breakfast room looking through the kitchen to the front of the house. Again, all of our work, we're matching the woodwork and the details of the house. So the little diamonds over the cabinet doors, those were found in the library and the living room of the house, and then we just basically did the glass cabinets as if they were windows looking into the breakfast room. This is a shot of the family room looking back through the stair hall, and there's interior windows, which we do a lot, and then into the kitchen, and then this is a shot of the kitchen. So I just wanted to say one thing. So the other thing that we do frequently is extend space with all of these interior windows, which really, creates like multiple readings of the room. So this house, I think this is in the book, this is called the backwards house. I just like saying that. This is the backwards house because you can see the first floor, the existing plan. You came in, there's a little, at the top of the screen, you came in through a little entryway gate, and then the front of the house, which you were supposed to enter, faced the ravine. But what happened over time is there was another drive that came around what was the back of the house that everyone used then to go into the house, and the kitchen just faced this driveway and wasn't particularly wonderful, and the clients wanted to have the kitchen facing the ravine, so we had to figure out how to reinvent the entry and turn the house around. So you now, oh, okay, well, anyway, I'll go back to that. But anyway, here's the, that's the existing house, and then that's, that was actually the rear of the house, and then there's the car is blocking the gate that went to the front of the house, facing the ravine. So this is like a wrapper that we did, so it around the garage. That's the new kitchen breakfast area, and this is a mudroom piece and matching the detailing. So that's what it looks like now. That was the existing, and you can see that. So that was the back of the house, and we made the back of the house the front of the house, I guess.
That porch was so prominent that people who hadn't been to the house before thought it was the front entry and walked into the corner of the kitchen.
Yeah. But, you know, compositionally, this just brought the house together. So you walked in, and there's now a library on one side, reading room on the other side, and you go through to the dining room. And then the next shot, this is now the kitchen breakfast area, and this is the existing dining room. So the owners also came to us with these Julia Child kitchen pictures, and so we took the colors from that. But this is the kitchen with the gabled area over the breakfast table. This house, this Tudor house, that's the existing, and the only thing we did to the front of the house was we changed the windows and we painted it. So when the owners came to us, we walked through and they just said like, oh, how can we make this house feel more today? I'm going to say modern, but I don't really think that's the right word. But it was. So we were like, oh, but when you see the interiors, you'll understand. So it was the wife was like, I just don't think this is ever going to work. But, you know, we convinced her we could make it work. So this, you can see that's the existing house. And there was a kind of servant, there was a small kitchen, there was a stair. You can see the windows of the stair. And then there was that kind of Tudored piece that came down and a really small kitchen behind it and a room over a garage. So we separated out the garage and we just did this. This is pretty simple. We kept, well, it was complicated, but it seems simple. This is existing, and this was the stair, right, the windows marching up the stair, and this is the new piece. And this was existing. And the one thing we did here is we added, you'll see in the interiors, we added doors around an existing bay, and we had to deal with egress windows, so we made a new kind of composition of windows, and the rest is existing.
We wanted the new wave to be set kind of equivalent to the old part of the house with the existing stair and its unusual stepping windows as a kind of inside corner or pivot for the whole house.
This piece, yeah. And thanks to Doug Hare, who did the landscape. So interiors, those are the new doors, and that was existing. This is the living room, looking out to the garden. And so this is what it was, the existing. entry foyer. There was a arch door to a powder room, arch door to a small kitchen, and then the second floor was actually, you step down into a principal suite, and they wanted everything on the second floor to be at the same level. So we rebuilt the stair, we matched all the detailing of the balusters because it did not meet code, and all of this is existing, this paneling, a new arch into the breakfast room kitchen, and new flooring. So this image here is looking back at the entryway, and you can see like all of this detailing. I know you'll appreciate it. You know, this is all matching what's there. So we always do this. We sort of figure out like, how do we do this? Figure out how to make it start and stop and be really continuous, as you'll see in another slide. This is actually, this was that's the existing door to, this was what was this?
Closet, and it was
Right.
small, so we extended it to the back and made a closet and a powder room.
And there, you can see these little windows over the powder room mirror, which are like lighting, they light the space. Opposite is a butler's pantry.
We paint the interior spaces
Right.
natural light. We're phobic about not making them.
And then this is breakfast room open to a kitchen that's looking back to the front entry. And so one of the things that we love figuring out is, so all this is existing trim, but it never worked like this in the house. So, you know, banding it, making it all look like it's built in at one datum that wraps around, that's, you know, that's what we try to do to define the space. And the beams are only in the kitchen space and breakfast room space, and in the family room, they're not there. They disappear. And this is the kitchen looking out towards the driveway with the glass windows, and then this is just, those are cabinets behind the range. Did you change the floor? Yeah.
The door actually.
The floor.
Slab of
The
marble.
floor.
What? Oh,
Yes,
the floor.
we changed the floor.
Yeah.
All the floors. And so now the second floor, it's all at one level. The whole handrail was redesigned. You go down the hall, and those are the windows marching up that are existing, and you go down the hall, and you're in the principal suite, which is this. And this is a landmark house by Dwight Perkins in Evanston. This is the front of the house. We were adding on to the rear of it. So you can see, let's see. So this, what we did is we added a new mudroom entry. So that's all new. That's existing above. And then this piece here is new, and that is the new family room. So from the back, you can see the whole house, the existing house kind of, this is actually truncated image for some reason, but the whole house stepped down. So we just, obviously we kept that because that's existing up there. And then this piece here with this walled terrace is new. And it is, we did have to go through the commission, it's landmarked, so the Preservation Commission, and yes, it met the standards. Thank God. This is really, I mean, this is existing. It's so great, isn't it? You know, it's just like a continuous space. It's divided by these columns, up the stairs on one opening, fireplace, and then there's a butler's pantry. So the owners love this. That's why they bought it, but they wanted the kitchen to not be natural wood. So our inclination was, oh yes, you match the wood and all the detailing, but they wanted it painted. So we just made the transition. You go through that butler's pantry, and then on the other side is the painted kitchen, which is it's all of the same detailing, it's just all painted. And those windows are existing. And this is the family room, and It's the same, all the trim is matching and wrapping around. This fireplace is invented.
Okay. In 2009, when we did a book called Transforming the Traditional, which was a collection of houses we had built, this house, which is actually in West Lake Forest in Summerfield, was the house that we put on the cover. Next slide. The owners came to us actually shortly before the pandemic and wanted to do an addition to the back of the house. And we sort of said, well, why do you want to do that, right? And it turns out that the back of the house faces due south and faces west. Due south was property owned by Lake Forest, which they somehow understood was not going to be sold, and due west was a wetlands preserve. It turns out that about 5 years later, the property to the south was sold, and they now look at houses. So what they really wanted to do was to extend the back of the house in a way that they could look across their property out to what in perpetuity will be nature, basically. The back of the house is, of course, symmetrical and had this wonderful glass cube sun porch with a little terrace on top of it off the master bedroom. And we not only said, why do you want to enlarge the house? We said, we don't think we can. The back of the house is symmetrical. You know, we just don't want to put an addition on it. What do you think the owner said? Well, if you won't do it for us, we'll get somebody else. So rather than having our house messed up, we designed an addition for the back of the house. And what we decided to do, even though it created some problems, not problems, but sort of issue with draining the space between the two roofs where they come together, we took the east side and extruded it so that there was a new enlarged master suite above, and then below a kind of family room with large windows that look west across their property. And another view that shows the side of the house in the addition. And then a view from the kitchen looking into the new addition. And if you see the doubled columns and that big opening, that's actually holding up the house above. And the source for the doubled classical columns actually came from the original house in the living room, where we had paired columns as part of the visual support for the large opening that interconnects the two-story living room and the dining room, formal dining room. And this is a view from the existing family room looking into the new space and then into the new family room. Okay, and here you get a sense of why they wanted to build this thing and the view out over the wetlands preserve. During this 40 years of doing house additions, we did get an occasional new house to build, and one of the questions that was foremost on our minds is, you know, what do new houses have to do with existing buildings? And for us, new houses are always built in a place, and that somehow the uniqueness or the characteristic of that place becomes, if you will, the context, but it becomes the starting point in the way in which adding on to a house and the existing house becomes the starting point. So we were asked to do a house in an enclave of houses built by Charles Hemphill, just north of Northwestern University along the lake. And it's a really interesting grouping of houses because they all were either Lannon stone or brick. They all had either slate roofs or shingled roofs. They all had classical entryways that were cut stone, and they all had divided light casement windows. So the house on the left is our new addition to that enclave, and we actually took down a 1950s Georgian, red brick Georgian house that had 8-foot ceilings and absolutely nothing to recommend it. I mean, you walked into the entry and you looked at the stair, not the lake. You went into the living room, and the living room, while it went through the house, had at the lake side a window that I would say was maybe 4 foot by 4 foot. You know, the owner, of course, bought this piece of property on the lake as a tear down. So there's the site plan. The lake is to the bottom, Sheridan Road is at the top. We conceived the house as two kind of connected or interlocking volumes, and we actually did the front of the house to relate to all of the Hemphill houses, and we did the back of the house clad in wood siding to give it the character of a beach house, which is really what this thing is. And here's a view from there's a short lawn, some steps down, there's a grassy dune, and then beach. So this is standing just at the beginning of the beach. And a view of the living room, which is really an open plan with the division between the spaces suggested by the columns. Next one. And a view looking towards the kitchen and the formal dining area, and that server is both storage, but the glass part is storage cabinets that have glass doors on both sides. So next slide. So it actually acts as a kind of window that interconnects the space of the house. And there are all of these places where you literally see through the whole ground plan of the house. So the views are not just to the lake, but immodestly they're to our architecture as well. So that cabinet that we saw behind the dining room table is the walnut stained cabinet that's on the left. The thing I forgot to tell you about all of the Hemphill houses is that they all had walnut front doors that were stained dark. So we made all of the natural woodwork in the house, which we wanted to call out as features, out of walnut. Okay? So thus far we've looked at some historical examples, some examples of the work that we've done over the years. And you may ask, you know, well, all of your stuff looks like you just made some more of the existing house. What about additions which are not in the style of the existing building? So additions that change the language of the original really work best, I think, when they're pavilionized, when they're somehow kept separate from the house. And then you have something like the entry pavilion by I.M. Pei to the Louvre, which is this glass pyramid sitting in the center of the courtyard. Okay, so when a pavilion is both in a different architectural language and smaller than the building it's added on to, one of the things it does is it forces the original building to act as a kind of background. And what that does, at least in my opinion, is it reverses the way in which we perceive the addition. The addition, because it's a figure against a background, becomes more important than the original building. Okay? You can certainly do a vertical addition in a different style or a different language. One of the things that happens, of course, is that the original building is treated like a pedestal or a tabletop that the architect gets to put their piece of sculpture on top of. Frank Gehry's famous addition to his house in Santa Monica, he's basically wrapped 3 sides of the house with this addition, which is made out of chain link fencing and corrugated industrial kind of steel, and then on the inside you get all of this sort of prismatic skylight. And the house in the center retains its integrity. It's got this wrapper around it. And the thing that always interested me is that big polygonal skylight is opposite what was a bay window on the original Victorian house. The first time I actually saw this house for real before I had actually met Frank Gehry, and when I met him, I told him how cool I thought that skylight was, because it goes from being outside to sort of dipping down and being inside. And I said to him, how'd you keep it from leaking? And he said, well, I've never been able to stop it from leaking, but then it's my house. This was a few years before he built the Sten Center at MIT, which I don't think they've been able to stop leaking. And then lastly, in terms of famous buildings or building ensembles where the buildings were wrapped or faced, is Michelangelo's remodeling of the Capitol buildings in Rome on the Capitoline Hill. And you can see in the plan what he's done is to add new faces, or in some cases, pieces that adjusted the geometry so that he could make this wonderful regular plaza. So, you know, it seems to me that for things that are really simple extensions of an existing building where there's a dramatic change in materials and details and the architectural language, that rather than getting something that even pretends to be an integrated whole, visually what you have are two buildings built side by side and then linked.
Oh, I guess. That was very subtle of you, like not commenting on that last image. But I'm just saying, that's what we learned to do in school, actually. You made a glass addition and you thought it would go away. Anyway, so I'm going to read this. In conclusion, our philosophy of additions to buildings is that they shouldn't look like they crash landed from outer space into the side of the original building. So we know what the image on the left is, and then the image on the right is from Independence Day. Yes. Anyway, intended or not, every addition renders a judgment of the building to which it is added. You can do it, because I'm doing this one.
Okay. So for those of you that are classic movie buffs, the images on the right are the opening, 20 seconds of Louis Buñuel's famous film, Le Chien Andalou. And it's an eyeball being sliced. Has nothing to do with the story of the rest of the film, but boy, are you shocked and sort of set up for the rest of the movie. And I've felt that kind of violent gesture is sort of the way I would describe the Daniel Libeskind addition to this military museum in Dresden. And we've always felt that, like a doctor, the architect should first do no harm. You want to get the next image?
Okay, this is the last one. In the desire to make things that are new and original, which all architects seem to want to do, things that have never been seen before, the architect joined together incompatible parts, and it never really worked out.
And we know how that story ended. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. So, does anyone have any questions? We wanted to take just a few minutes. If you had any, I would walk around. Of course, Art has one.
I'm just curious about some of those houses. The existing houses were fairly interesting, the ones that you didn't identify the architect. But some of those Tudor 20s looking places, who were the other architects of those places?
You know, in some cases, we know who the architect was when it was somebody significant, like Robert Wark or Dwight Perkins. Most of these houses don't come with floor plans. We go to the local historical society, and sometimes we'll try to find out who did them, but oftentimes that information is just disappeared. It's just gone. Sadly, you know, the city of Chicago in 1968 threw out all of the plans that they were storing for building permits. The city of Evanston never, at the turn of the last century, never kept drawings. So the Historical Society has, by address, the building permits. So for many of the houses and the buildings in Evanston, we can find out who the original owner was, who the builder was, and sometimes who the architect was, but not always, because they weren't as important as the guy who actually built the house.
Any other questions? Paul says no. I was thinking you were going to ask one. Okay. So we wanted to say thank you again for being here. We do have books out in the lobby for purchase, and obviously they're here to sign them. And then we, again, would love to welcome you to our next event, which is next week on the 12th at Gorton Center. So thanks again for being here.